Hi, I'm Bob Tabor with LearnVisualStudio.net. We now have a map and a single image returned from Flickr. So we have the basic building blocks of our app in place. But our eventual aim is to show a list of images on a separate page, a results page, instead of just one. So in this lesson, we're going to do that. We're going to add a search results page and display all the images that are returned by our search. So our game plan in this lesson, we're going to first of all add AroundMe assets for the tile image and so on to start branding our app. Nice little way to dip our toe back into the next lesson after a long, hard lesson previously. Then we're going to add an application bar and a search button on that application bar that will help us to navigate from our main page to the search results page that we'll add. Then we're going to add a new search results page. .XAML, we're going to add a text block to the page just to make sure that we can navigate from the main page, pass along the latitude and longitude, and then retrieve them out and display them in a little text block on the search results page. That's a nice little way to step into and make sure that our navigation works correctly. And then we're going to clean up and refactor the code that we've written in class files and clean up the code that calls our new class file method so that it more closely resembles our original diagrams, our low-tech mock-up of the user interface. And then by the time we're finished with this lesson, we should have a new search results page that lists, at least 20, 30, 40 results on the page. So that's what we're going to try and do. Another long lesson. Sorry, a lot of code. We're going to be moving things around. If you get lost, make sure you always refer to the text beneath this video. It may not line up perfectly, but there will be enough instruction there to help you get oriented the right direction and make sure you're kind of following along as much as you can. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward. The first thing we want to do, we're going to stop the previous execution. And I want to take the assets that I made available and that I've unzipped into the C9 Phone 8 project. You remember this folder. It had all the assets for the various projects we were working on. We want to grab the contents of the AroundMe_assets. I'm going to right click and copy. And then I'm going to go to Visual Studio, to the assets folder. I'll just select all these and select delete permanently. And then right click and select paste. And now we should have a new icon, the feature.search.png. We have a new app icon, so it's looks like the Sears Tower, and it has a little camera next to it, which is translucent. It will show through any the primary color chosen on the phone. In my case, it would be yellow. In the case of our app, I think red is the default. Let's see what we have inside here as well. We've got a flip cycle tile as well. So we've got some assets. Now let's open up our WM app manifest.xml file, and we want to change the display name. I think it's just fine the way that it is. We want to make sure that the app icon is seen correctly, and we want to make sure that template cycle is chosen as the tile template. All right, it's important because much later on in this series, what we're going to do is whenever the user selects multiple images that they want as their lock screen, we also want to make those images available as images that we will cycle through. So if somebody pins our app to the start page, they'll see all of the selected images in a cycle. And so we start off with cycle 1 just being our application icon.png, and we'll add in the other cycle images programmatically once the user has chosen them from the results page. All right, so make sure template cycle, make sure the tile images are set for small. This should be the flip cycle tile small.png, and then cycle 1 can be the application icon.png. All right, so if you have all that, you make those changes, click save all, and then let's move on. The next thing we want to do is add the build localized application bar. So we want to add an app bar to our app. We've done this a number of times. I uncomment out both the call to this method and the method itself. I'm going to go to Edit, Advanced, Uncomment Selection. All right. And the next thing I'm going to need to do is make some modifications here. For example, we're going to change this URI to point to our assets folder. We have that new feature.search.png. So let's add that. All right. We're going to change the app bar button.text, and we'll just hard code that to the word search. And then app bar button.click, I want to wire that up to something called search click. So we'll add a new event handler method stub called search click. I'll right click it, select generate method stub. Great. And so when somebody clicks that little search icon on the toolbar, we want to navigate to a new page. I'm going to go ahead and set it up, and then we'll add a new page a little bit later here. So string nav2 equals string.format, and we'll give it a string, and then we'll give it a page. So we'll call that new page that we'll create in a moment search results.xaml, and then we're going to pass the latitude and the longitude using a query string. So question mark latitude equals, and then we'll replace that, ampersand longitude equals, and then I'll add a replacement code for that. And so where can we get the latitude and longitude from? Yes, the AroundMe map. Control.center.latitude. And then the AroundMe map.center.longitude. Great. It's coming together. And then finally, how do we navigate from one page to another? Right, the navigation service. Navigation service.navigate. And navigate needs a URI. We've created URIs before. URI needs two parts. It needs a string representing a place we want to navigate to, and then URI kind, relative or absolute. Good, good, good. All right, very good. Now let's just see it in action, just for fun. All right, so we have our search button. Very cool. And if you take a look, hey, we got our AroundMe logo and the red comes shining through. Very, very cool. All right, let's stop that. The next thing we need to do is add a new page to our project. So I'm going to right click and select add new item. We want to add, make sure you're in the Visual C# templates, a Windows Phone portrait page, and we're going to call this search results.xaml. And just to make sure that we are navigating and passing data, I'm going to add a text block that I will remove later. But this is just a little mini test for me to gain a little confidence that I'm doing it right. So I add a little text block, and then let's see, in the search results.xaml.cs, I want to add an event handler. So we're going to go loaded. We're going to go loaded plus equals, and search results loaded. That's fine. And then here I'm going to set location text block dot text equals string dot format, and I just want to do something like this just to make sure we got it right. And one, and now we got a little dilemma. How are we going to get the values out of the navigation service? All right, so we're going to have to come back to that. I think what I'm going to do is create two private member variables, obviously called latitude and longitude. So that's the way I want to do it. But how am I going to get those values populated? Let me start by declaring them here. Private double latitude, and then private double longitude. All right, now how am I going to populate those? Well, I just happen to know that what we need to do is work with the onNavigated_to event for the phone application page. Now, unfortunately, it hasn't created it for us as a little template, but once the page has been navigated to, that means the navigation service has been engaged and we can grab out any query string parameters. Then that onNavigated_to will happen before the page has completed loading. So that's the perfect time to grab out the query string values, latitude, longitude, set them to our private memory variables, and then we can rely on this actually having the right values. So here's the only tricky part. I'm going to have to look at either some templated code or perhaps look at another a code example to create the method stub for the onNavigated_to event. So I happen to know it's protected override void onNavigated_to, and after I get so far, you can see that I can just hit tab on my keyboard and it will create the remainder of that event handler, plus it will call the base implementation on the phone application page, which is exactly what I want. And then after we've called the base onNavigated_to, we can write our own code here and expect it all to work just fine. So latitude equals, and I know we're going to grab the navigation context dot, it has a query string, and I can then index into the query string using square brackets and then give it the value I want. So I know that's latitude, right? So that should return back the latitude. But wait a second, latitude is double, but I'm trying to grab out the query string, which is string, so I'm going to have to convert this. Fortunately, I'm going to use the convert system.convert class to convert to double, and I give it a string, and then everybody should be happy. Yes, okay, everybody's happy. Like, everybody better be happy. Convert to double, let's just start there, and then we'll go navigation context, query string, and we need longitude. Awesome. All right, I think we got this working now. So let's go ahead and run it. All right, and if I hit the search button, it does navigate to this new page, and it passes along latitude and longitude, so we're good to go. All right. So now what I want to do is I'm going to refactor my code. The term refactor I'm using here very loosely in this context. It means I'm going to reorganize my code without changing the functionality. So I want to improve the quality of the code. I want to make sure it's more readable, that its structure is more correct, that it's organized better, but I don't want to change its functionality just yet. I have some problems with my code base that I'm not really happy about. For example, the most obvious one is that these classes, they need to sit in their own files, ideally. Now, I'm just going to create one file, and I'm going to stick them all in there. But if this were a real project, I would probably not do it that way. I'm going to call this the photo class. And the reason why I would prefer to put all of these into their own files instead of just one biggie is so that I can find them easily. I can find the classes easily using Solution Explorer instead of having to hunt and peck around for them. All right, so there we go. We've moved those guys into their own file. That's great. And so now this file only contains the definition for the main page.xaml.cs. Perfect. Okay, so that's the first improvement I want to make. And the next thing I want to do is I'm going to add another class, and I want to use that class to wrap the call to the Flickr API web service. So I'm going to call this this new class Flickr image, and it's going to have really two purposes. and I'll get to that in just a minute. All right, and the first purpose of this class, let me just make this a public class, is that it's going to represent one Flickr image. Now, we already talked about the URLs, that there are different sizes for images. Like we were pulling back a _n size, which I believe is the smaller of the two, and then there's a larger size. I'm not exactly sure. I'll figure it out here in a second. But I want one instance of this class to represent one image, but it could be at different sizes. So I'm going to create two URIs, one for the smaller version of the image, the 320 by something or other image. And so here I'll just do it like this: prop, tab, URI, tab, image, 320 for the smaller version, and then URI image 1024 for the large version. The smaller version will be used in the search results page to grab out smaller versions of the images. The 1024 will be for larger images that we'll use for the lock screen once you've made your selections. Okay, so Flickr image represents an image, but it could be different sizes of those images, or the URIs that point to different sizes of those images. But then I want to use this class for a second purpose as well, and that is to wrap the call we'll make and make it static. So we'll go like a public static get Flickr images, and it'll actually let me return the data type. We'll return a list of Flickr image, like so. So this class, when we call it, we'll call FlickrImage.getFlickrImages. We'll give it some information, and then it'll return back to us a list of images. And then we'll bind to that list of images and use the image 320 URI to show tiles with an image in each tile representing each of the images that were brought back from Flickr. All right, hopefully that makes sense. All right, so now this get Flickr images is basically going to be everything that we've done in here, like everything we've done from here down to like there, I think. All right. All right, so we're going to copy all that, and we're going to put it here like so. All right, and I'm going to need to resolve some of these guys because the new file does not have a using statement for several of the classes we're going to rely on. Let me just make a quick pass through here. All right, and since we're moving this to a new file, we're not going to have these values to pass in. So let me go ahead and we're going to add, like for example, double latitude and double longitude. And so then we'll replace these guys with latitude and longitude. And that should make them happy. And we have an await keyword, and we know how to resolve that. So we're going to have to make this public async static list of, whoop, now you're not happy. That's because when we make a method async, the return has to be a task of the type we want to return. And again, this will all get explained in the very next lesson, but to resolve it for now, I just wrapped the return value with task in an open and close angle bracket. Okay. Okay, we're going to need to resolve this as well using Newton JSONsoft. Great. And we no longer have Flickr image, so we don't really need that. We don't need that anymore, so I'm just going to delete those guys from there. We do need that, however. All right, let's get rid of that. Now our aim here is to return a list of Flickr images. So let me go ahead and create a list of Flickr images called images equals new Flickr images, like so. And then do is create a new Flickr image called image equals new Flickr image. Each time we do a loop. And our goal this time is to create this base URL. And so image.image320 equals the new URI, and give it the base Flickr URL plus this _n dot JPEG. So let's remove that from there. Okay. And then this line of code is going to be almost identical, except it's going to be for the 1024 version. And this will be the larger, the bigger version, _B. Then we want to add all those, or that image that we just built, to our images collection. And then finally here, we want to return images. All right, so that's ultimately what we're trying to do with this. Now we spent a lot of time constructing this URL. I mean, a lot of code is devoted to this purpose. And I think what I would prefer to do is to take all this out, and I'm going to come back to this, and I'm going to create another method, and I'll call this private string get base URL, and I'll just construct it in there. So then we can just do something like this, var base URL equals get base URL, like so. All right, why aren't you happy? Oh, if we're going to call a private helper method from a static method, we have to make it static as well. That's easy enough to do. Okay, so I think the only thing that I'm going to have to pass in latitude and longitude again. So double latitude, double longitude. Cool. That should satisfy that. But I think I want to pass in this Flickr API as well. I don't want to just hard code it in there. I might want to use this some other day. So it seems like a pretty useful little class to have around. So let's go ahead and let's go string Flickr API as well. And that should make you happy, or API key. Okay, do that. Good. And then we got to return something here. So let's return base URL. Okay, I think that'll work. Oh, but I need to pass in some stuff. So I'm going to have to pass in the Flickr API key. I'm going to have to pass in latitude. I'm going to have to pass in longitude. Which means I'm going to have to pass in string Flickr API key, like so. And just for readability's sake, I'm going to move these on different lines. And I'm also going to give it a default value of not a number, so that if you don't supply it, we might still be able to do a search, but we'll supply not a number, and we'll see what that gives us. We'll do the same thing here. Okay, a lot of typing of code here, but I think I have something that should work. And now what we'll want to do is we're going to revisit our search results.xaml, and we're going to want to call that Flickr image or that get Flickr images method from here. Before I do that, let me hold on to this real quick. I'm just going to put this, sometimes in Notepad, I'll just hold on to values I know I'm going to need in the future, like so. And I think I can get rid of almost everything inside of here now. And the only thing I really want to hold on to, I don't even want this anymore. I think that's all I need. We'll get rid of that too, clean it all up. In fact, I'm going to go to mainpage.xaml and I'm going to remove this. And I'm going to remove that. I don't even need any of that stuff anymore. All right, we'll rework the row definitions stuff later. I'm not going to worry about that right now. But I think we've completely cleaned up the update map. And now what I need to do is I need to go into the search results.xaml.cs. And here what I want to do is I'm actually going to use this Flickr API key, and I'm going to make a constant out of it. So private const string pull all that back, Flickr API key, great. And then this is no longer useful. Whenever we load the page, we want to kick off the Flickr image dot get Flickr images, and I'm going to pass in the Flickr API key. I'm going to pass in latitude. I'm going to pass in longitude. And then that should give me what I need there. What's your problem? Oh, I spelled string wrong. Easily fixed. Okay, so I got that back. That's good. And now I need to, what I want to do is I'm going to make images. Now images is a list of Flickr image. I'm going to make that as the data context. So I'm going to set the data context property of the search results page. So any data that this page needs, I'm going to set that to images, like so. That should work. And then the next thing I need to do is go into the search results.xaml page. Let's make some room here, set this to fit selection, great. And here I want to change the definition of this page. We've already used a long list selector previously. I think that's what I want to use. I like the tiles that we worked with previously. Everything about that is good, so let's reuse that. So the content panel, and get rid of this text block. It's no longer useful. Let's go phone, long list selector. We'll set its layout mode equal to grid. This should all be familiar. Layout grid cell size equal to, got to give it two sizes, so 105, 105. And then I'm going to set the item source equal to the data context for this page. And since it's already set as data context for the page, I don't have to give it anything else. I can just give it this keyword binding, and it will find what it needs. Okay, but what I do need to do is phone long list selector dot item template. Whoops, not item source. Item template. There we go. I need to give it a data template. So how are we going to render each of these images, each of these Flickr image objects that come back? Let's go data template. And then let's set the image, setting the source equal to, we want to set the binding equal to a property like image 320. So the 320 property. And then, again, that stretch, I'm going to just say, hey, fill her up. Do the best you can. Don't stretch it, whatever you do. Okay. And while I'm here, I'm also going to go ahead and, while I'm thinking about it, before I forget, I'm going to change this to AroundMe, and then I'll give some instructions, and we'll we'll act on these instructions later. Pick for background. All right. All right, so if I did everything right, and that's a big if, I'm going to go ahead and run the app, and it should work. I mean, not just work a little bit, it should really work. Okay, I'm going to click the search button, crossing my fingers, nothing's happening. I have a feeling we missed something somewhere. Let me, I got a suspicion though. We made it to the other page, but for whatever reason, we never got values back. So I'm thinking this has something to do with the search results.xaml.cs page. When we call Flickr images, do we not get information back from that? And it takes me a little bit to figure this out, but eventually I see that Flickr result returns no values, and it did before, so something's not quite right here, and then I realize what the problem is. I passed in latitude twice. Now, you probably caught that while I was typing, so why didn't you tell me? That's your fault. You're the wingman here. So latitude, longitude. Okay, let's go ahead and get rid of that. Whew, okay, let's go ahead and run it now. Boy, I hate when things like that happen. But I think everybody does. So let's go ahead and click search this time, and with any luck, yes! Yes! All right, we see results are in or around the John Hancock Center. Awesome. Okay, so before we close this lesson out, during a code review, Clint discovered 2 small bugs in our app, and it's really important that we take the time to fix these. Now, so I'm going to need to make just a few small modifications to what we've already done. So I'm coming back to this a couple of weeks after I originally recorded, so that's why I have the hockey beard now. But these modifications that I'm about to make to the code, you're not going to see these modifications, the lines of code that I'm about to add, in the rest of the videos. However, they will be present in the downloadable source code, also in the text and screenshot version of these lessons, and so on. So both of these bugs appear in this get base URL helper method that we created earlier in this lesson. So the first mistake that I made was really just a dumb mistake on my part. This replace method returns a string. It doesn't just set the string that it's called on, rather it will return a string value. So we need to capture the value that's returned from replace and set the license variable to that new value. So it's as simple as this. License equals license.replace, and that will fix that bug. All right, now the second bug that we have in our code will only surface if you attempt to use this app with your physical phone device, or perhaps if you choose a different location than I've selected in the emulator. So actually, it's not really a problem with our app per se, it's actually a problem with Flickr's API. So Flickr's API will only accept 5 digits of precision, and if you ever send it more than 5 digits of precision after the decimal point, then it will never return a result. So sometimes the phone will return 8, 10 places of precision, and therefore we're going to have to use the math.round method to ensure that we only send up to 5 digits, or rather 5 places of precision. All right, so here we go. Let's go ahead and make the changes. I'm going to just do it right below this line of code that we just modified. So if not, double dot is not a number, so we'll just make sure that we're working with a good number here for the latitude. Then we'll set latitude equal math.round, and we'll give it latitude. And then you can also specify the rounds a decimal value to the specified number of fractional digits. That's the overload that we want. So we'll just set that to 5. And then we'll do the same thing for the longitude as well. So if not, double is not a number, longitude, Then we're going to set longitude equal to math.round longitude, and we'll pass in 5. All right, and that should fix the problem. Okay, sorry about that. Sorry for the confusion. So let's go ahead and recap this lesson. To quickly recap, the big takeaway in this lesson was navigating to a new page and also talking about how we were able to restructure and refactor the code so that its implementation becomes cleaner and more obvious. And you'll see the value of this reorganization a little bit later as we continue on through this series. I'm really just planning ahead by separating out a lot of this code into this class, flickrimages.cs. And while I don't think that we really learned anything new per se with regards to binding and such, we did get another chance to exercise the things that we learned whenever we were working with the SoundBoard application yet once again. Okay, so like I promised, it's time to talk about the async and await keywords, and we're going to do that in the very next lesson, so we'll see you there. Thank you.